اوكي واضح. لا من غير ما تغير وين توصل انت واحد انا نشعل الضوء، وين توصل الواحد انا نشعل الضوء، تبدا من 9 لواحد وين توصل للواحد انا نشعل الضوء. واحد اوكي
اخر حاجه عملوا خرجوا فيها رابور كامل من يونيفرسيتي فرانس بس كل بيت وعملوا ارتيكل كامل الدور بتاع اليونيفرسيتي كل خرجوا ارتيكل
سيداتي سادتي مشاهدينا ومستمعينا، مرحبا بكم. جلسة علنية أخرى هي السابعة في سلسلة جلسات هيئة الحقيقة والكرامة، نفتتحها بالنشيد الوطني الرسمي.
يسوي السماوات في رعدها
والآن نستمع إلى كلمة هيئة الحقيقة والكرامة.
And now we proceed with the opening with the IVD. Good evening and welcome everyone. Today we are not celebrating anything, but it is on the occasion of Women's Day. Just an ordinary and regular technical problem that occurs to everyone. Today it's the occasion on this occasion of Women's Day to shed light on violations that have involved Tunisian women for ages, but also to record and make unforgettable their achievements. Tunisia is a leading country in women's rights and liberties. And when women dare enter public spheres, they would find themselves face to face with facing or against the mechanisms of despotism. Women often can be either loyal to the established policies of those who rule and find themselves sometimes outside of this sphere. Whenever they find themselves in opposition positions or acting for their rights, they would also find themselves exposed to this repression machine that refuses to give women the right to enjoy their full rights. This repressive policy and the violations that involve Tunisian women are not something new and are not limited to the Ben Ali era. We find that since the inception of independence, there were activist women who found themselves in prison, like Mrs. Omezine Benaifa, who was trialed by the upper court and imprisoned 4 years. And she's from Electar, and she was activist. And here you see her file and the sentence incurred by her simply because she supported resistance in the Gafsa Mountains. These repressive policies recur again and again over 60 years, and they have been systematic, practiced also against women's movements. Whenever these movements distinguish themselves from the mainstream and established policies and politics, and whenever women dared resist and object to the established rule. Today, we will discuss, or we'll at least see and witness, 3 types of violations. And this is not representative of all the violations incurred by Tunisian women. There are those that have related to the basket that supplies people to go to prison, and also those who are women's rights activists, as well as those violations that involved the victims of Decree 108. So let's listen to these victims. We invite the attendees to please kindly shut off the phones, their mobile phones, and not use them in the room, as well as not to applaud. Thank you. Mrs. Ola Benishma would proceed to introducing the first case. You have the floor, ma'am. Thank you, Mrs. Chair. That basket of supplies that is supplied to prisoners, to inmates, is more than a message. Brings is a message. It is a part of that message delivered to a dear one, and also to fight injustice to which are exposed that family. It is both that support provided to the inmate and also the burden incurred by that family to provide for their needs. The burden of preparing that, the burden of taking all the trouble to deliver that, and the burden also to ensure that that food would keep the flavor it has and the touch of that hen that has always supplied it with love, so that the message would be delivered at a time when that message was often denied. It brings together all those, that pride, but also all the degradation and the intimidation before the doors of the prison, before a police or a prison, in front of the prison, who's before a woman who's and a mother who seeks simply to deliver that basket that has become a burden without anything being removed from it or simply scattered. It is no surprise that in that basket there is all that brings together that love of sweet things, of spicy things, and all the rest. That basket is not simply food. It is a bravery fighting that resistance. It is the weapon of hope in fighting the policies of hatred and repression and despair. Mrs. Mbarka Tunekti is not with us today because this woman had 5 inmates, and she had her son-in-law. And even when she was visiting them, she was suffering from diabetes. She suffered from a large number of diseases, including especially Parkinson's disease. That's why she is not with us today. We will see her in some of these extracts that have been shot by our team, but her daughter Huda, who also suffered along with her mother and experienced the burden and that bitter experience of delivering the basket to inmates. Mrs. Mbarka, you have the floor to tell us about the conditions during which you have been doing that. We wait for the video first. Thank you.
وصلت ما نمشي نزور بنيت ندفع القفة باش نمشي نزور يجي بلقيت على أساس نتاع الحبس.
Whenever I go to visit them,
مسات في المحرمة. ما ندخلش نزور الخاطر مسات.
we were often sometimes denied access.
يزيد يفرق السهالك.
The cost of that basket was sometimes very high. Sometimes they would deliver it, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they would remove parts. Raouf, it was summer, and we delivered olive oil, 5 liters. But he never received a drop of those 5 liters of olive oil that we delivered to them. I have been to Burj Rumi, to Nafavril, to all these are prisons. We were often also inspected, and they would sometimes also investigate everything about us.
والزيارة احنا نتاعنا احنا سوريا معناتها يعيط الواحد كل واحد وحده.
When visiting our inmates, we would be called one by one.
ويوقف حداك بوليس من التالي.
And we were often, I met them often with the police behind me and who would be monitoring what I would say. Something secret maybe. And the one behind me would be keeping an eye on my son on the other side. And while there's another one on the other side as well. So I forgive, you must say. I don't know. This cannot be forgiven. This cannot be the subject of forgiveness. Huda, you have the floor.
احنا عائلة كبيرة شوية.
We are rather a large family.
تكونوا من أمي وبابا.
My mother, my father, and 14 children. The family was quite large, and my father was a bus driver at that time. Our ages were close, and we were quite young. The burden started at home in 1984. With the first protests in Belarus that involved students, and at that time the students were arrested and their lists were posted in their schools who would be expelled from their schools. Among them was my brother Abdurraouf. The next day they went to school and they were informed that they were acquitted from school at once, and that's the burden that started then. My father tried to register him in a fee-paying school, and he wanted him to continue education. That was his wish, his design. Then there was 1987. And there was a protest planned in Radis, and my brothers agreed to go. It was late afternoon. In 1987, we knew what home raids were. My brothers said that the police were in huge numbers. We did not know at that time what the police were. We did not know what that was. My brother Raouf came home early and we slept. We waited for my brother Faisal, but he did not show up. And my mother was anxious, and she did not know why my brother was late. Then we heard our door being knocked very hard, and we did not know why. So we went out very rapidly. And then we had, you cannot imagine the number of these people, all armed, and they were knocking the doors down, and they were asking where my brother Abdurraouf was, and he was asleep. They broke the door and they started beating him, and they were kicking him on his feet, and he woke up very alarmed and very scared. They said, "You are Abdurraouf?" And I said, "Yes." And I remember they just seized him by the clothes and dragged him out very violently. We were really astonished. One of them looked at my little brothers, my younger brothers, and said, and he had a gun, and he said, "If you move from your place, you will know what you see what's going to happen to them." That was the first time we saw armed police. They took my brother, and we were all astonished. My mother could not say anything. When my brother was asking why, they did not answer him. She said, "We will tell you why." At that time,
بعدها كما نقولوا نحن حكاية ساعة ونص تقريبا.
About 1 hour and a half later, we had another raid. We were still trying to get ready, and then we had another group. They were armed, and they brought with them my brother Faisal, and they said they arrested him in Radis. They entered the house and they said, "Where do you sleep? Where are your books?
وينهم أخوتك الآخرين؟
Where are your other brothers?"
المكتبة وين نحطوا نحن الأدوات المدرسية
And
نتاعنا.
they went right away to the shelves where we kept our books. That year, my brother was in senior high. He was preparing for the baccalaureate. The police, and they took the books, the school books, and said, "These are the books that really poisoned your ideas, your minds." It was a regular book. It was a regular philosophy or literature book. And they started throwing the books on the floor and said, "This is what has poisoned your mind." And they started simply really collecting those books widely. And she got very scared. She pushed us aside and she said, "You stay here, do not move." During that time, then my brother Abdurrahman was so arrest time was from about 1 week to others. When Faisal came back, cannot tell you what happened because his back was injured and he was bleeding. He could not sleep. My mother would ask him what was happening, but he would not be able to answer. The next day, he asked my mother to apply something on his back. And then when he removed his T-shirt, his back was all injured, and he was telling us that he was actually beaten, he was battered by the police, and we were really frightened. That was the shock. Then in 1990 came the big crisis. In 1990, the big burden started, and then the pressure was high, and the big raids were there. The raids involved homes. My brothers said they would not sleep in the houses in our home any longer because they received information about raids and young people being arrested. Often some of their friends were arrested. We became very scared. You cannot imagine how frightened my mother was. The first thing that was in her mind is that they would simply destroy our books and school purchases. I remember my mother used to take all the big books and she was to put them in plastic bags and bury them in the garden. And anyone who had anything written, she would say, "Maybe this is dangerous," and she would burn it. She was so frightened that when she would burn these documents and these texts, she would try to throw the ashes and destroy all the ashes. She would never accept the explanations we provided. All the horrors she witnessed in 1987. With all that, she said she would not she would not accept anything. When my brothers started losing their books, often and they were looking for some books, often they referred to that as my mother's act. If these were seeds, we would have had trees growing of magazines and books. She was so scared, she was so frightened, and the only thing that recurred to her mind, often that recurred in her mind, was the act of destroying the books I remember another act. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, around 2 o'clock in the morning. We were asleep, and then the door was being knocked very hard, and nobody could imagine. And then you would hear people running on the rooftops and knocking on the windows. Many of them were knocking on the windows and on the doors. My mother was. We were scared, we were frightened, we were screaming. Somebody knocked the door down and entered. We got so shocked, and we don't know. Sometimes you run into something you don't know. If you run into these colossal soldiers and policemen were against the wall. They did not allow us to put on the lights. We were young, and we had our younger brothers and sisters, and they had weapons pulled and aimed at young people. What kind of childhood is that? What memories of childhood would you keep? My mother was extremely frightened, and she was horrified. She said, "Why all of this?" And he looked at my mother and said, "You did not know how to raise your children. You know how to educate them." My father would ask what happened, to say, "Hajj, if you educated your children, we would never arrive to such a situation." They often would go to the books, they would go to the dressing, they would go to the closets, and the first thing they would destroy was our diplomas. It was our school records. They would destroy them. Most of our certificates were destroyed very wildly, very savagely. They would destroy the books and throw them against the wall. You're scared and you don't know what you're going to fight. What are you fighting for? Just your education. At that age, you have nothing else but your school. These were the first raids. That was the first night, and it was a horrible night. And even with time, and you see, it's been years ever since. That night would never be forgotten from our memory. We would be there and you say, you see that after that period we would be sitting together as young. You remember, do you see? Have you ever seen real weapons? You say, yes, we have seen real weapons. You say, then we would tell children, is it like in films? You say, no, it's not like in films. We would describe that to them. We would describe the colors to them. We describe the things to them. Imagine how at that time, at that age, what kind of childhood are you talking about? What kind of childhood was protected? The following day, the raids were day and night. You never know when they get into your homes. It would be 11 in the morning, and you see just the hallway full of people. We would be scared. Maybe you're getting ready to have your dinner, but then all of a sudden you see this group of people raiding your home. I remember once they came late afternoon. You would never imagine the number. Their outfits, some were in civil dress, some were in uniforms, different colors, different weapons. Some were wearing heavy boots, heavy military boots. They were large in number when they raided down homes. Although we were a large family and we were 14-member family, we would find 2 or 3 next to everyone. We were dying of horror. They would say, where are your brothers? Where are they? They arrested my brother, and they say, what family is this? The Tonekte family. You really are burdening us. We're exhausted. Where are your children? We say, what kind of education is this? You have made them losers, and we are losing our time with you. Your 5 brothers were arrested, 5 of them arrested. Can you tell us about their burden? They often, when they would come to ask about one of my brothers, we were often sure that one of them has been already arrested. I remember that after all that pressure, my mother was a victim of hysteria, and we were obliged to take her to a psychologist. And often my father would ask around, but never deny. He was often denied an answer until we got information that he was in prison. They were in prison. Some would say they are here. Some would say they are not. The first prison was 9 Avril. Then my father would go to the court to have a visit, prison visit permits. And that's how we started the visits to prison. And that's how we became acquainted with that. The first was in 9 Avril. We would at least be assured that the brother is there. When you go and ask about the other one, you would be informed you don't know. You go to Burj Rumi and say, yes, he is here. My mom would go and obtain that permit for Burj Rumi prison. She would go to visit my brother Marwan. They would tell her he's in Mornag, and then he would obtain that permit to visit him in Mornag. So everyone was assigned to a different prison. How would you do to visit all of them when they were all in different prisons? It was the real burden. Then came the burden of delivering the basket of food. You have no idea how difficult it was. You have no idea how difficult for a family of that number with one father at that time, a breadwinner who was a bus driver. You have no idea how much it cost. You know that the mother has to manage and wisely everything. I cannot tell you that my mom was more than the good management. She was good management itself. Although the wage was very limited, how would she afford the cost of that basket of food to every one of them? Because it is something essential, because they would at least know that their family still cared for them. It was the only contact. My mom suffered a great deal from that burden. You know that often people would go to the market to get everything early. Why? Because my mom would go towards the end of the market when they were towards the end. You know, you remember that vegetables often would be thrown then. But I remember we were very young. We would go to the market and take all those vegetables that were thrown away by the vegetable shoppers. We were often trying to get some of that in order to be able to forward something at least very modest. We used to have bread and water and squeeze a lemon in the water and just eat that. Why? Just to afford the price of that basket, because you know that your brother was deprived of so many things, was deprived of much. Your mom did not used to deliver one basket, but she used to deliver 6 baskets every week. How did she do that? They used to inflict pain on us, on my mother. They were, a Monday you have to visit one, on Tuesday you visit the second one, on Wednesday the other, on Thursday, on Friday. They were deliberately assigning the visit days so that it's not allowed. So every day you would go. To a certain destination. Imagine at that time and at that age, we used to be divided into groups in order to assist my mother. Imagine that a mother would not sleep with her daughters. Why? Because we would help her. We would be very tired. She would tell us to go and sleep, and she would stay to cook until 4 o'clock in the morning. And then 5 o'clock in the morning, we would go to the visit. She often would go and take her 2 others. to take the basket because that basket full of food was very heavy. Every day, it was our life. There were those who would go to visit, others who would go to deliver the basket, depending on the days. The next day, so those who would deliver the basket would go to visit, and the next day, those who took the visit, who took the basket, would go to take the visit.
كنا كي نمشيو للقفة المدة الأولانية كانت القفة نهزوا
When we used to deliver that basket of food, you have no idea initially. You have no idea. That is, people who are in prison and have no food, have nothing. At least, what you say, I would try at least to provide them with 3-4 meals every day. You remember that food used to be in plastic. We often, that basket would never come back to us. You know what that means? It means also that you don't even pay for the food, but you pay for the basket and you pay for the Tupperware. You say, why people usually are, why don't you give us your stuff? You say, no, Mom, we wear the same stuff, we wear together the same clothes. And she never, and in fact, during that period, because of being tortured, they had problems. Some of them had their backs damaged. The skin was actually on their t-shirts. They would try to wash them, so they remove all that flesh. For 6 months, they would not deliver these clothes. But then if you look at these clothes deep inside, you would find bits of flesh. You would find blood. You would find nails. And then we started asking. And then when she would deliver the basket and say, why? Why do you have that blood? Why is that nail? But it would be very harsh reaction if he answers. And the next day he would not be allowed, or the next week he would not be allowed to receive visit, because he would be in individual confinement. Why? Because he did not accept to cooperate. Often when they come, they usually would have their hands down. They would not show their hands. So often my mother, when she visited them, she would try to really see them, to gaze at them and look at them. And she would report, I see that their eyes were tired and they would not show their hands. Why? Because their hands were often bleeding and they had no nails. They often, when they are out of individual confinement, they would often be limping. And you see that often 4 o'clock in the morning, my mother leaves 4 o'clock in the morning to see her son. And when she arrives there, she sees that situation. And then the next night, when she gets home, she will have to start again preparing all that food in order to be delivered to the other one. That burden of a prison starts anywhere. It starts in the streets, taking that basket. The same faces you see, they are on the bus. They are next to you. They accompany you. They go to prison with you. And when they look at them and say, if you're wearing these clothes, we're from the South. My mother was very conservative. We never left home without the cover. So she often, when she arrives to prison, we're still in the streets, he would just get our IDs in order to get in. You have to remove the ID. What are you wearing underneath? This is my veil, that I cannot remove it. The safsari. And I say, I want to see what you have underneath. You say, it's okay. Just remove a little bit. I want to see the color of your hair. We could have avoided that because we often were wearing either hats or scarves, or it's often very cold. We would be wearing just hats or anything. But when it's summer and you have that veil, you say that the safsari, you have to remove it. Otherwise, you would be denied access. If you want to see your son, you have to remove this. You say, I am just putting this veil the Tunisian way. I say, even if you have it, you have to pull it to the back. You don't wear it this way. And when she enters the prison, she is still in the gate. You're about to enter the visiting place. One of them would stop before her and say, you have to remove that veil or you would never be able to enter. You would be denied access. You say, look, I'm old. I'm your mom's age. You say, my mom has been to Mecca for pilgrimage 4 or 5 times and she never wears this. You say, this is not acceptable. You say, no. He would say simply that you cannot enter this place if you're still keeping that veil. The pain of this. You told us how the 6 were in 6 prisons, but at a certain time they were grouped in the same prison. How did they deal with your mom, and how did she provide for the basket? During the visits, it's impossible to have the 2 brothers together. Once we want to visit Raouf, he arrived and he said he was an individual in confinement. Why? He said, when I was in the Ministry of Interior Affairs, it was much better than in the individual environment. Imagine what that means. It means that he was subject to torture. He could not walk. When he would stand, he would be holding to the wall in order to talk. Say he was in individual confinement. They were outside in the court, and he saw his brother, and he was very happy to see him. He was simply raising his hand to say hello. About 1 year, they did not see one another. When he raised his hand, he was taken, and he was pushed into the cell for individual confinement, tortured, and asked who that person was. Sometimes they would ask us to visit too. Would we allow to visit too? We would queue up, and then the visit. Say the 2, you visit the 2 together. The 2 in 2 different rooms at the same time. What does that mean? It's impossible to see them at the same time. So we used to divide ourselves into 2 groups. That is, each 3 would go and visit one of them. Our visits were usually the last. It's between 12 and 12:30. During the early years, the visit would not be beyond the 3-4 minutes, and it would simply say, "Good, hello, how are you? Everything is fine," and then it's about it. They would tell you that the time is over. So we would often split into groups. All the family was mobilized. A group would go to Raouf, a group would go to Faisal, the other one would go to the late, rest in peace, my brother Faisal, and even we lost everything. We lost everything, our jobs, everything. What does it mean to go to see your brother in prison just to make them feel that they have a family, that family did not drop them, that family that wanted to stay together, stay united. My mother used to remind us always, never drop your brothers. You have to remember that they are your brothers. Those who witness this, those who have seen their brothers in prison and all that pain, you know what it means to be a family. Because my late brother Mahdi, rest in peace, they were often exposed to diseases. Mahdi was very sick. Mahdi was coughing, and he asked to be referred to a doctor. Said, why? Because simply you're coughing? Then that cough became more severe. And when we visited him, he was breathing heavily, and he was telling us that he was not feeling well. His lungs were not fine, and he felt that his breathing was not easy. You see, My mother says that, but there are doctors say the doctors would simply provide them or aspirin or simple painkillers, Panadol or anything, nothing else. That is the medicine we get from doctors is nothing. Even when moved from a prison to prison, and when I'm telling them that he is sick, you say it's nothing. It's just a cough, and that cough became very severe, and then he started suffering from very heavy breathing problems. And then when he left the prison, he became very depressed. During the first period, those who spent 1 year to 6, those who were simply trialed for belonging to an outlawed group, during that period when they left the prison, they would be under administrative control. So Mr. Mahdi was very sick, and he was asked to go 4 times a day to the police station. It means that no one can do anything else. You know what it means to study and continue. Huda, what happened to you in all of this? To you? When the raids on our home started and the arrests started, I used to study in Radis.
كنا نقراو في رادس وكانت فما فرقه من رادس تجي كانوا كل مره يديهموا الدار جاو هزوا خويا عبد المنعم كان
There was a squad that used to come from Radis. My brother also, Manam, was in Radis with us. I used to study secretarial assistance. And there were at that time protests. During those protests, we were 3 girls leaving school. They arrested us and told us to go and sign commitments because we were veiled. Imagine a young girl that would go to the police station, and then there, what kind of feeling you would have there? You cannot really look at them in the eyes and have that feeling of fear and fright. They would hit you with keys. They would spunk you. They would remove your veil in a way you can never imagine. Our veils were removed. We were aggressed verbally. You can never imagine what words they used. We signed and left after about 2 hours. We wanted to go home, but we don't know how to go out with those faces, with all the marks of that spank that left us staggerbasted. We did not know what was happening. Imagine that after that, we went to the sea just to wash our faces so that our families do not know that we were arrested by the police. Then there was a police raided our home at night. They wanted to find out my brother Manam. And at that time, actually, he was arrested by the National Guard in Belarus, and they kept him in their station. At night, there were the raids again. And then he looked at me and said, "You are the Tonekti in studying in Radis?" And I thought it was about that thing. He said, "Yes, I study in Radis." He told me, "Tomorrow we'll settle that." Imagine a policeman threatening her daughter that tomorrow he'll settle things with her. What kind of feeling would she have? The next day she told me to forget about school. You cannot discuss it. You cannot discuss that because you know the situation of your family and you know what is happening to you. During 4 days, I did not go to school. I wanted to go back to school on Monday, and I had a medical certificate. And then the guard, the security, simply told me that the administration want to see me. I went to the administration, and then the one of the administrators told me that you cannot get into school before you bring your father. During that time,
السيكتور هذاك ديما كان يخدم في الليسي.
my father used to drive bus number 17, which usually drove past the school. Said I would stop my father anytime and tell them that they wanted him in the administration. They told me, no, you bring your mother. And now you go and bring her. I did not understand what that means. So I went home, and then I told my mom that they would not accept me at school and that they wanted to see her. Say, how? What does that mean? Why do they want to see me and not your father? We waited for my father to come back home around 3 o'clock. My mom went and told him that I was not allowed to go back to school and that they wanted me to go with her. I said, what does that mean? I am the one responsible for it. He asked me to wear my clothes. Then we went to school. When we entered the school, he said, yes, ma'am. Said that you did not accept my daughter. I am her father. I am the one in charge of her. He said, why? This is my ID. This is my daughter. He said, no, we want to see her mother. What does it mean that you want to see her mother? We have certain documents to be signed by the mother and not by you. Said my wife would not come to school. And then the administration told us that then your daughter would not come back to the school as well. I was expelled from school. They told me that either I would bring my mother or I forget about school. My father told me that if anything is happening to me, it won't be worse than what is happening to my brothers, and that I should forget about education. I stayed home. Imagine what would happen to a person like me that is dropping school. Why? Because of the veil I used to wear. What difference does it make to have a veil? At that time, you had no one to defend you, no organizations, no associations. And then we talk about freedom. You don't even have the freedom to wear what you like. Imagine once we were all together in the house. The police came to my home and found us, that my father and us, girls, they used to enter the house without permission. The most polite would break the door and enter. We were sitting down with my father. He said, what Hajj? All the family is wearing ribbons. He said, Hajj, bring all the girls and come to me to the station to sign a commitment. Can we imagine like a chicken followed by chicks? My father was walking amazed and shocked, and we were behind him. We went to the police station. You have no idea how we were received there. Verbally insulted. You have no idea what is being said to my father and my mother and us kids. Words we have never heard before. Words we did not know. And the famous sentence, the Tonekti family, you really exhausted us. We don't know where you came. You know what you should be doing? You should be in the desert, and you should be in the Sahara, and we should shoot you and leave you there to the Carians. You have no right to answer. You have no possibility to answer them. We all signed commitments, and then we went back home. Thank you, Huda. Thank you. Do you have any requests? We always say, thank Allah that things have changed. Thanks to Allah that we are in this situation now. Our hope is in this revolution. We were very happy when this occurred. I think we are here to talk about the burden and all the problems encountered by women, women would continue to work and would produce further and prepare further generations. Women are that big school that prepare it and educate generations. My warmest greetings to every mother and every woman, and those who should be prosecuted for what they have done. Because after you lose your education, because we are deprived of living our childhood, that happiness, those memories, our happiest moments were going to prison to see my brothers. Our happiest moments were finding a magazine or a newspaper. We were begging our neighbors to deliver to us all the newspapers to read them secretly. And I hope justice be done. Thank you. The second testimony would be by women activists, Mrs. Ahlam Belhaj, who was supposed to be with us, but she apologized for personal reasons, but we have recorded her testimony and we will watch that together.
My first activity was on March 8, celebrating the International Women's Day. At that time, the Tar Haddad Club was active in the early 1980s. One of its activities was organized in the medical school. That was my first encounter with the women's movement. Then we organized into a committee for women, and we celebrated March 8 in the campus. That was the first time. And actually, at the time, it was hard to celebrate that day because the regime did recognize only the 13th of August as a celebration of women, and they would accuse us of celebrating a Western tradition. They wouldn't also recognize the women's movement, but at the same time, there were other contacts with the Students' Union, and gradually, from the university, and after I graduated, I became a member of the UGTT in 1989, 1990. There was a women's committee which had stopped in 1985 after having carried out its activity. Till then, we tried to get that committee back on its feet in the Jerba Congress, and I was a member of the women's team which worked on that. We proposed the quota question at that time, and today we have reached this quota. The idea that women would be given some special status as regards representation was something rejected by everyone, and the idea was rejected, and I'm glad that in 2017 we have reached this goal. In August 1989, the association was founded, the Tunisian Democratic Women's Association. We got the official license and permit to operate. At that time, we were not in a conflict with the independent women's movement. But at that time, the state did not simply approve of our movement because there was a feeling that the state was responsible for what we would call the state feminism that started with Bourguiba, the first president, and the state would always present itself as the defender of women's rights, and then under Ben Ali, the freedom of women was used by the regime. So an independent movement of women claiming that there is no real equality and no true citizenship was simply rejected. One of the most important things, one of the most important characteristics, besides being autonomous from the regime, is that that movement had a different reading of the discrimination in the Tunisian society, of this male-dominated society. It's true that the family code brought a lot to the Tunisian society, but there was a lot of discrimination and many shortcomings. So the feminist movement was there to say that there were a lot of problems with regard to discrimination against women. And this was also linked to freedoms, to democracy, and that equality wouldn't be possible without true citizenship, which is itself based on freedoms and liberties of all kinds, that is social, economic also, and political. And we always said that being a feminist is a cross-cutting phenomenon, which also includes our vision of the distribution of wealth, of the mentalities, and I think that there was a lot of overlapping between all these dimensions. So in the UGTT or in the League of Human Rights and the other associations, including the Search for Development Association, there was some sort of link between the individual requests and what was hoped for in terms of the entire society. So in the beginning, there was this autonomy, independence from the regime, because we were convinced that the regime was unable to achieve equality and democracy and liberties, particularly at the end of the Bourguiba era, where we witnessed the establishment of the Tar al-Haddad Club, and then we had this call for the referendum about the family code. Because rights and liberties were not guaranteed, actually, and at any moment they would be put at risk, since there was no democracy. Because you know that democracy in the public sphere is overlapping with democracy in the private sphere, and if there is no equality in the private sphere, this would be echoed in the public sphere. We wanted to highlight this link between the two spheres. And actually, we were granted an official status in 1989, but then we very quickly started to witness violence against the members of the Association of Democratic Women. And to protect those women victims of violence, we were constantly in a conflict with the state. Because when we supported women victims of violence, we had to confront the state entities which did show no respect for rights and liberties of women. I remember in 1991 when we launched the campaign against violence against women, and we wanted to talk about violence. Of course, in our charter, we had as a goal to speak about violence. There was a girl who came to us who was 13 years old and who was raped. Her father ordered her to leave home with her mother because this was about the honor of the family. and the state institutions did not protect her. The police did not provide any protection for her. The justice did not provide any protection for her, and there were no shelters. When we tried to take care of her, we discovered that the state wouldn't show any respect for women victims of violence. So we launched that campaign, and the poster that we tried to use was seized by the Ministry of Interior, and they denied that there was any violence in the country. And at that time, the state started campaigns of violence against citizens. We actually so they rejected the idea that there was any violence, and they did not want us to launch that initiative. And at the end, we put a lot of pressure to recover that leaflet. But we were able to carry out that initiative, but that was also an opportunity for us to understand the reality of violence rampant in the country, because a lot of women came to us and talked to us about their experiences with violence, and that was in contradiction with the official state discourse. We organized an international conference on the violence against women. The proceedings of the conference remained in the Ministry of Interior for 14 years. You would ask the question, why would this be considered a risk for national security? That means that our project, the essence of our project, was against the government and was against the choices of the Tunisian state, which on the surface of it were supportive of women's rights, but in reality wouldn't show any respect for women's rights. We wanted to talk about corruption. We wanted to talk about this repression of citizens, but this was this has led the state to repress us. The state just wanted us to be the good image of the regime. They would use women actually to give a good picture of Tunisia abroad, but we were there to say yes, of course, we had achieved much compared to other countries, but we were far from equality. And we were there to say that repression and dictatorship were not conducive to equality. And this is why we had this confrontation with the state, and that was quite early, actually. That was back in the early 1990s, where we discovered the true face of dictatorship with all the repression campaigns against Islamists and people from the left wing of Tunisian politics. At that time, autonomy just became opposition and not independence, because we really wanted to defend equality and the rights of women, and the need that the need for to address the problems of discrimination. We opened a center for the victims of violence in 1993. And we have received more than or about 4,000 cases since then. We have witnessed all sorts of violence, sexual violence, economic violence, but at that time the particular characteristic of Tunisia was political violence, because we received many cases of women who were subjected to political violence. We had women from all the classes and social segments, those who were politically committed and those who were not politically committed, those who used to wear the veil at that time, and those who did not wear veils at that time. But you know that at that time, people coming from the disadvantaged segments of the society needed a lot of support, and we provided that support to women. Actually, they were subject to violence because they came to us as an association. Sometimes they would prevent them from getting into the headquarters of the association. But at that time, they were aware of the importance of such a center and of the role played by the association in supporting Tunisian women back to political violence. We witnessed all types of political violence, and it was not addressed against activists, but it was addressed also against those women who would go to the police station to ask for something. The educational institution would also carry out such political violence. There was sexual harassment, etc. So there were many institutions which engaged in this violence against women, but the police was the real problem, and we had so many cases with that police institution. The entire association was targeted, but the activists, members of the association, were targeted, and even those women who resorted to us were also subject to this violence. The presence of the police in the vicinity of the association, we had no access to the media. We couldn't meet in public premises. The internet was most of the time not available. Our telephone calls were under control. There was a lot of harassment on a daily basis, and we wouldn't live a normal day in any way. We had to fight for our rights. We would suffer to have access to basic rights like having a normal telephone call, because most of the time there would be someone listening to our phone calls, or the telephone line would be cut. You know that women activists could be subject at that time to sexual assaults. We once prepared a statement in which we said that yes, we accept all the adjectives and qualifications that you use against us. If it's the price to pay for supporting women, yes, you may consider us to be bad women if this is the price to pay to continue supporting women and defending them. So we told them that we were ready to pay that price. Now I can talk about this, but at that time this was not something easy at all. So many women and many men in Tunisia at that time waged this fight, and there was a lot of nice solidarity between us, and we would show this solidarity in the country and outside the country. We believed in a cause, but we still believe in this cause. It's not something about the past, and the fight will go on because there are many areas that we need to address, like corruption, like torture, etc. We still have to move forward, but there was this harassment on a daily basis at the workplace, in our careers. everywhere in the passport, in trying to get a scholarship. When we went to administrations, we were faced with obstacles everywhere. There were moments which were very hard because the regime did show no respect for anyone. They did not show respect for women, for the elderly, for children. And there were moments, let me say, years of pain for all of us, where we saw all types of restrictions against us in our daily lives, in our family lives. They would also try to target you through your kids. They would respect. They wouldn't respect you even if you were weak or sick. But they would take advantage of those moments of vulnerability to show more repression. I did not go to prison, but I was in a big prison. I took the basket to prisons, and I was ill-treated. They broke my car. They besieged my house. They harassed my kids. They wouldn't allow my friends to get to my place. My husband was prosecuted and went to prison. The entire family was harassed. Life was difficult for us. Besides the fact that we were insulted, that we were beaten, this is something that all activists in Tunisia know about. The interest of the Association of Tunisian Democratic Women was the public sphere. We were interested in the public sphere, actually. We have always shown this interest in public affairs, but we focused also on the specific situation of women, because this is something that people tend to forget about. The fact that women were in the unions, in democratic spheres, the fact that some women were in a confrontation with the state. Maybe one thing that we did not talk about much is the solidarity that was shown by women during the fight for their union rights. There was a momentum created in the Tunisian society in the early 2000s that started in the textile sector after having signed the multi-fiber agreement, and new forms of activism like sit-ins started to appear with the participation of entire families. We had the example of the Sahel region, of Fantasia in Tunis, etc. And this lasted 4 years, and then there was the Social Tunisian Forum and the International Social Forum, and which immediately was in a confrontation with Ben Ali and the regime. And of course, we were prevented from holding our meetings until we reached the mining basin women, and we all know the role that they played, and the association had a role to play in that fight. We focused on the specific characteristics of the women's fight. The first public appearance of the leaders of the mining basin was in the headquarters of the association. We received Adel Haji, and there was a public meeting to inform people about that movement which started in that region of the country, and that these people shouldn't be left alone. Then we became aware of the fact that at the heart of the fight were women who resisted supported the regime, and we started to establish strong communication and tight communication with women there. One day we went to Gafsa to attend some trials. We went there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were the only car to be stopped and prevented from getting to the city of Gafsa. This was a recognition of the role played by the association in this fight, and so we have received women actually victims of violence, and they women which translated the fight against repression and against discrimination in the country. But at that time also there was a coalition of associations to defend liberties and the country and to make our voices heard. A lot of women who were active in the association. They came from trade unions and from other types of associations. And we were able to create a new democratic discourse. And actually, the good thing is that we were ready after the revolution to present our vision and our reading of the legislative framework for women in the country. And we were able immediately after the revolution to present our thinking about that and our reading of the legal framework. And I think that we were successful in the aftermath of the revolution to have a constitution which showed respect for women, and I think that we were part of the process in the beginning through the democratic momentum, the social momentum, and also the women's momentum and movement, and we were able to be at the heart of the revolutionary process. When the revolution started in Sidi Bouzid, we were there and we showed solidarity and we issued statements, and also we were among those who contributed to the first alliance of associations that said no to Ben Ali and which urged him to listen to the people. And we were keen on achieving the goals of the revolution. We took to the streets also, but very quickly we were the victims of repression on December 29, I think, we called on January 29, we called for a demonstration to remind people of the role that we played in the revolution, because people tend to forget the role that women played in the revolution. And but on January 29, we became aware of the fact that the fight was still in its beginning, and that we had to be patient, as all women would know. And I can testify to the fact that activists in this sphere are extremely patient, and we are continuing the fight to achieve full equality. The Tunisian constitution stipulates that men and women are entirely equal, but the situation on the ground is different. Today we are attacked sometimes, we are subject to restrictions, but there are many generations of Tunisian women who will carry on the fight for a better Tunisia and for a better citizenship for all Tunisians, and for women who would live in total equality. Thank you very much. Let's continue now with Mrs. Rada Gharbi, and Mrs. Salahuddin Rashid will introduce Mrs. Gharbi. It seems that Mrs. Ahlam Belhaj has told us clearly that discrimination is still there, and that women are still subject to, and also other segments of the Tunisian society are subject to discrimination, and there are men also who are subject and victims of this discrimination. They were activists in the past, and they are still fighting for the rights that they fought for a long time. She was true in talking about this. Now, the other figure that we will listen to is Mrs. Rawda bint Musfa Al-Gharbi. She was born in 1950 in Tunis city. She was educated in the primary school in Bardo. Then she went to the Al Basha Street High School, where she got her degree in arts, and she joined the Faculty of Arts and Humanities in 9 April. She got a degree, a postgraduate degree in social sciences. Then she became a teacher in high schools, and she was a member of the UGTT. She's a human rights activist and a civil society activist, and she has a daughter whose name is Sana Shabrouch. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
I wish Tunisian women a happy anniversary, and my tribute to the former president of the Women's Association. The presence of such women's associations shows the long effort invested. Of course, talking about the past is about reliving the past, but also to reconsider the suffering, to review the suffering of those who have sustained a lot of suffering since independence. With regards to the testimony I'm about to give, and which is about several stages and long periods, my testimony refers to a major part, which is the conflict of interest for the citizens who are involved in public life, conflict of interest with a strong willingness and a strong resolve in order to control public life, and the political monopoly and the control over people's movements. We've witnessed that in the life of the Students' Union, in the Labor Union. We've witnessed that in our belonging to the National League for the Defense of Human Rights. Now, after the revolution and after the civil society took over, we hope that we will not live the past violations. The beginning started with the students' movement. The involvement in the student unions. It is worth noting at the beginning that there was the special atmosphere witnessed by the students, female and male, in the first decade after the establishment of the University of Tunisia. The pledge made by the state in terms of generalizing and dissemination education and emancipating women. With regards to education, the university at the end of the 1960s, in the first decade, the university was a space a beacon for education, and there were great professors of human sciences who were teaching there, and strenuous efforts were made by the state, and there was positive interaction and response from the students who were yearning and keen on learning, and they were keen on interacting with their professors. This interaction led to the fact that Michel Foucault, Georges Lapassade, those renowned scholars mention and highlight this keenness. Michel Foucault said, "I've never seen such, infatuation with education by the Tunisian students." With regards to the women who left the schools where there was pressure from the family, these girls found themselves in an open space, in a mixed space at the university, which is characterized by culture and innovation and creativity. This atmosphere was very helpful and convenient to these girls, and this atmosphere prompted these girls to interact even more with their professors, gaining more confidence and having more self-confidence and participating more in the student life. And the Students' Union was among the things that attracted the attention of the students. And this Student Union was a mechanism of dialogue between the different stakeholders in the university. And therefore, the students were keen on controlling this Student Union in order to ensure that it is a way of regulating the relationship within the university. Even though there was a struggle for the independence of the old Student Union, in the late 60s and at the beginning of the 70s, these students were completely resolved to take control of their union, and their Congress that was held in Korba, and that was an important landmark in the history of the Students' Union. I took part in that Congress, and there was a proposal on part of the modernist movements made up of the communists, pan-Arabs, liberals. They were striving to change the structure of the Students' Union in a way that protects the union from the control of the governing party, and to ensure that the Student Union operates in a democratic fashion. Therefore, they invaded the Congress, and they imposed another committee, and the Congress came to a halt, and 105 congressmen presented a petition, and they said that they would not remain silent. The next year, the students came together requesting another extraordinary Congress, and they continued with their protest until the month of February, when many thousands of students were gathered, and they had their own Congress for many days, and they discussed the situation. There was a social crisis, but there was the students held their Congress, and as soon as they finished their Congress with the election of their committee, they were harassed by a number of law enforcement officers who attacked them, and ever since there were a series of assaults and harassment of many hundreds of students who were arrested. My first arrest was in February 1972, and They were interrogating us, how did you collect the money? And they started to investigate this success and the secret behind the success of the students. At the level of our daily struggle, it was a great achievement on part of the students. These students were interested in public life, and therefore we wanted to stage a big protest to express our rejection of the American policy in Vietnam. And therefore, the Tunisian people were still enjoying the victory against the colonial forces, and we were attached to our universal principles, and the students were in the forefront of that campaign. And then afterwards, I just want to remind that the arrests were arbitrary. They were not subject to any time frame. They would reign in the houses at night. They would take people to the police stations and then they scatter these people arrested around different areas. I won't get to the specifics of all the arrests. There were so many arrests for me in February 1972, in November 73, in October 74, in March 75, which led to my imprisonment in the civilian female prison, because we belong to the trade union movement and because they sensed that there were some secret political movements who were related to the students' union movement. And then after February, after the series, after we sensed that this series of arrests were not going to stop, we thought about creating a committee within the students' union whose task is to defend the prisoners. And in February, after my arrest, after I was released, we set up a committee tasked with the assistance by providing baskets, food baskets, and to speak out against the practices at the level of the media. There was an assistance and a support campaign. We started in primitive ways. There was contact with the media, national and international level. After the first trial, those arrested were released in September 72, but in 1973 I was arrested again, and they were scared about the defense that we put up for these prisoners. They would mistreat us, they would take off our clothes, they would step on us and say we would kill you. And at a given time I thought I would be killed because in the absence there was no in the absence of a lawyer, the family did not know. We were completely unaccounted for months. In 75, for example, from the 19th of March up to the 6th of June, there was no food basket, no washing, no showers, no news exchanged. We were completely cut off. These arrests were consecrated by a trial in August 74, where 102 stragglers appeared in trial, and in 75, 101 individuals were tried. And in these groups, there were also women present in the Qorba Congress, in the February Congress, and many women were detained. I'd like to mention that there was ليلى تميم ساسية رويسي نيلة زغيدي فضيلة تريكي سعاد تريكي أمال شلوف. A large number of women were detained for a certain period of time. First, they evacuate the state security offices, and these offices become detention places, and there's an open door. So it depends whether these girls are in groups or individual. So the door of the room is open, and there's a law enforcement officer 24 hours, and for weeks and months, 2 months and 3 months, undergoing interrogation with different teams taking over every time. They would come, take you to these special rooms. Some would put in the roster, they confront you with your colleague who is naked, and they do confrontation between the different witnesses. For the 1975 trial, after I was referred from the State Security Department from the 6th of June, we spent the summer in the female prison of Manuba. We were preparing the trial, and we were rehearsing what we would say in front of the judge. The prison was actually a biblical site, but it was distorted in such a way that you would choke there. There was no electricity. There were only keys being used excessively. You are turned into a number as an individual. You lose your identity. Your feeling is that time comes to a halt. You have no intellectual capacity to understand whether the situation is going to end. You feel that you are there to stay. The first weeks were in solitary confinement. The situation was unbearable. I'd like to pay tribute here to those strugglers who spent months and years. I can mention the deceased Ahmed bin Uthman. So many of these prisoners who belong to this movement, the student movement. The solitary confinement is like a cupboard in a kitchen with a mattress and with a tool for a toilet, and you have just one day to go out to the area, and so you have a hole in the wall, in the door. So it's very difficult to spend a day in that cell, and therefore, so then I was reunited with some of my colleague women when I was transferred from the State Security Department. I was happy because they took me to the prison, because throughout the periods between arrests, I cannot tell you how close we were controlled, and those cars that are parked and the relatives of the family of those detainees, the harassment of my brothers. So they would harass them at the workplace, my brother, my sister. They would threaten my sister, who is a teacher, my brother, who worked in the media. He was asked to make a coverage, and he resigned not to make that coverage. The neighborhood was troubled by the excessive presence of the police presence who controlled everything around the neighborhood. There was the presence inside the prison was more comfortable, better, and I managed under this continuous moments of terror. So after the first and the second trial, we were acquitted, and we had to forget about those weeks spent at the State Security Department and the prison. Since the first hours of interrogation of the students who took part in the students' movement, they knew who is the friend of who, and they knew that I had recently a relationship with of my friend, and they harassed my family. And in 1973, when they came to arrest me midnight on the 12th November, they surrounded the area and they wanted to arrest my husband in 1973, and he was arrested and he was sentenced for 7 years. In 75, I was also released, and I joined the teacher's profession. I started teaching in order to be covered by UGTT, the Tunisian Labor Union. In all cases of arrests, it was Habib Ashur, the leader of UGTT, who did his utmost to have me released, whether when I was arrested at the State Security Department. From 75 up to the 80s, 5 years of prison with a group of people. These groups of people were imprisoned nationwide, and every time these groups sometimes were made up of 17 or 20. We tried to organize campaigns, media campaigns. There were protests in front of the parliament in order to stop the injustice. There were some news about my release, but it was not true. There were some hunger strikes in order to respect the relatives and the family, because the food basket would be badly searched, and there were also campaigns to defend the prisoners, and I also belonged to the union, and as you know, after the crisis of 1978, the elected members of the union were eliminated, were removed, and they imposed other leaderships. And in the midst of these unionists, there was a struggle and there was a dispute and controversy over the way to deal with these imposed leaderships. These imposed leaderships would visit different areas to give their propaganda. These meetings, we had to attend these meetings in order to inform the other colleagues who did not know what was going on in the labor arena, and to speak out against the violations against trade union liberties and against the rights of some elected members of the union who were removed by force. In the 1980s, I was finishing 5 years of imprisonment, and every week there were some days in order to collect the resources, and sometimes I was nominated in Grombelia, and then I was brought to Zahra, and then to Montfleury to teach in Montfleury, and then Rue de Marseille. And at that period of time, there was a students' movement at the level of the high schools, and in front of the high schools, and I was threatened, if something happens, it would be my responsibility. In the last 2 years, my sister was injured, and my sister, who was my elder sister, got sick, and she died at the beginning of June. We spent 2 years confronting this yellow union, and I ended up being completely exhausted, and I stopped teaching, and I joined the Center of Research and Documentation. This was a new era, actually, because we had a period of disappointment and setback. This group that was supposed to be some kind, it was supposed to be like an observatory for the cultural policy, and Monser Ruisi appointed me head of that research and documentation center, and we know also that the League of Human Rights was also harassed, and when Ben Ali took over, he harassed them even more. There was my colleagues were I was fired from that institution, and I was completely overlooked and ignored by the authority of the Ministry of Culture. After we have been ignored for many years, while other people were, climbing, the scale of promotion, and if the minister is happy with you, you get promoted, and otherwise you would be completely forgotten. There was a boycott by your colleagues in the corridor, so you are left forgotten. I spent many years in that situation. The 1980s were a turning point with the establishment of the female movement. We got affiliated to the Tar Hadet Club, and we set up a female newspaper, and there were regular meetings on a weekly basis that paved the way for the emergence of the Association of Democrat Women, and we provided many shows showing the difficulties for the independence of this association from the party and the government in power. We adhered and advocated the project for women, for the promotion of women, as the state established that project, but showing some of the shortcomings. the state wanted to monopolize women's issues, and the Association of Democrat Women was completely harassed because they wanted to monopolize every activity pertaining to women. This was not acceptable, and many of the strugglers spoke out against this attack against this association because these attacks were aimed at undermining the independence. You all know what happened also to the League of Human Rights under the era of Ben Ali. It was the last fortress, the last rampart to protect people, and for which Ben Ali could not find any solution. The board of directors of the League of Human Rights would meet in their private houses. The militias of Abdallah al-Khalil and of the government and Ben Dia militias were trying to use their power in order to be the first to give the good news to the president about the harassing and the stealing of the computers of the League of Human Rights. But the League of Human Rights was the stone upon which the back of Ben Ali broke. We continued our fierce defense for the independence and the autonomy of the League of Human Rights. At the end of that period, the modernist project, where there is respect for the state institutions and the civil society, the civil society would be also a mechanism for interaction with society. In the traditional society, there were other mechanisms for the elites to communicate among each other. There were these new mechanisms that emerged through modernism. We adhere to that on this, but this modernity was distorted and tarnished. That's why there was a call for a return to obsolete systems, and there was also a tendency to return to undermine, to return to the non-democratic life. We were adamant that a modernist society should be based on democracy, on the respect of culture, gender equality, and therefore they tried hard to control this mechanism that would allow a better life. They wanted to take control of this mechanism and the one-party system. Therefore, there was also a response of many groups in order to accept the idea that some old systems could be used today. There was a call for a complementary democracy, a system whereby the different groups take part and where human rights are completely respected, and whereby there is a protection from the single-party system. Here I would like to highlight the seriousness of and the gravity of political responsibility. We now see people who some people would pretend that they were serving their country. After the revolution, they pretend that they had been serving their country, and we meet with them and we tell them that entire families and generations have been sacrificed, and for them it's just a detail, and they would pretend that they had served their country. And as long as we are turning a blind eye, these groups should be ignored. Let's continue to search in the past, and we shall stand against those who would characterize this as curiosity of the past. And we thought that those who had ambition to take part in public life are the ones who would suffer. But we find that many entrepreneurs and all of these people were not spared. Anyone who owns something has been attacked in order to steal their project. I hope that we will not relive that situation of oppression. Now people are fully aware that we must respect human rights, and any system that goes against this tide would not be acceptable. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Rawda. We now move on to the last topic, which is about the 108 circular and the violations pertaining to that circular.
Every morning I would say good morning, and they would ask me to take off the veil so that I can have access to my school. On May 16, 2016, there was a collective application made by women that pertained to Circular 108. The education institutions were, according to statistics, the institutions where there were where most restrictions were performed. Though Tunisia had ratified a number of international conventions, including those against discrimination against women, but there were many violations of the right of people to address in whatever way they deem appropriate, and the IVD actually came to acknowledge that the Circular 108 issued by the then Prime Minister Mohamed Mzali simply asked the administration not to accept women wearing the veil and stop women working from having access to their workplaces. Sorry, there were instructions then directed by the Minister of Education to stop school children and students from getting into their schools and universities because the veil was deemed contrary to the Tunisian tradition. The Circular 108 simply specified what kind of dress was accepted. There were other circulars following that one, 102 of 1986 about the dress code for civil servants working in education institutions. The then Minister of Interior, Abdel Ali, in 1986 issued another circular. Then Muammar Shadli in 1987, the Minister of Education, issued another circular. On July 2, 2001, the Minister of Education, Mansour Wizir, issued another circular. There were other decrees in 2002 issued by the Minister of Higher Education, Sadiq Taban. Then in October 2003, Habib Mubarak, the Minister of Health, issued another circular that was a systematic practice in Tunisia against the veil, and the administration was used to prevent women from wearing veils. And those who resisted that were simply at risk of losing their jobs. Other rights were violated, including the right to transport and to education and employment, because at that time the veil was considered to have political connotations. And under the former ruling party, there was a determination to put into practice Circular 108. But at that time, not only activists were repressed, but there were simple school children and students and women working. They were arrested on the streets and taken to police stations to sign commitments to not to wear the veil anymore, and their right to be educated was violated. And one of the consequences of those circulars was deprivation from access to basic rights. And even the women who belonged to the former ruling party were subject to such repression and violations. This happened mainly in the larger cities, more than small cities, and in the north, more than in the south, maybe because of the local dress habits. The civil society tried to protest against this, including the protest in Bizerte in 1981. A few days after the first circular was issued, other human rights associations supported the victims of this circular on the basis that this was a gross violation of human rights. The fight in front or before the courts was also waged, and there was a case submitted to the administrative court. But despite the good reputation of the administrative court in facing up to repression and dictatorship, there was no ruling issued as to the lack of constitutionality of the circular. And so in fact, the administrative court simply said that the veil was maybe there was no breaching of any laws in wearing the veil. But Ahmed Swab, the then president of one of the chambers of the administrative court, simply issued a decision whereby the veil the circulars on veils were legitimate. There was an appeal against this, and this appeal in 2008 was rejected based on grounds that the provisions in the circular on the veil had to do with the achievement of the goals of the educational system. The circular reflected the gross violations perpetrated by the regime, but at the same time, the fact that women resisted and did not give up on wearing the veil despite all the repression and restrictions, that was one sign of the resistance of women. There were more than one circulars, so we will listen to Mrs. Ines Janfawi. Mr. Khalid Krishi will introduce her. A country without women is a country without water. Only the oppressors know women. all the repression that was that Tunisian women were subject to since the 1950s and up till 2013. The repression and the resistance simply led to the new Tunisia. All the violations that we tackled in the process of transitional justice were inflicted on women, including the system established by the 108 circular. Out of 16,000 applications made by women, we have seen so many repression, also much repression in the beginning. The right to dress, the right to dress and to wear the veil was actually violated. Ines Jafnawi was prevented from wearing the dress that she chose to wear, despite the opposition from her family. Out of fear, she was obliged to dress in a way that she did not accept. And when she resisted, she actually was expelled from school. Then she was deprived of her right to have an employment, even in private companies, and she's been deprived of this right until today. Though women are half of the society, but in the process of transitional justice, she's the entire process.
In the name of God the Merciful, today I'm speaking with my own heart and the heart of many people whose hearts are beating along with mine. I'm going to speak along for those who also have gone through what I have gone through. I hope that their voice would be heard through mine and that I would be able to say what I want to say. I'm Najwa Janfawi. I'm 33 and a half years old, mother to 3 children. My eldest son, Abdurrahman, is 9 years old. And Muhammad, Hamza, and Khadija would be, the youngest would be 2 years and soon. I am what we call the cotton generation. That is, we don't know much about about politics. Cotton means they lived softly. That is, they don't know what I was the serious, hardworking, polite student. I have never been punished or the subject of discipline, even whenever I meet my teachers, even from primary schools, and I meet with them, they're often happy to see me. I graduated and I could have asked for anything, but since I was 13 and 14 years, I wanted to study management and computer management, and then I wanted to study especially computer programming, maths, and all those things I wanted to study. Then I had very good grades, so I had what I wanted, and I got admitted to the management school. 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, and something really got my attention. And I would like to say here that in 2002, there were women who were actually, there was no, I did not see any woman wearing the veil, even in the street. I'm not talking about elder women, but people meant that in my own culture, we thought that only old women would wear the veil. But then when I went to the management school, I realized that there was one girl who used to wear the veil, and I discovered later on that she was one of my neighbors. And then there was another girl I did not see often. And I considered myself as the second veiled girl. On the 4th of October, and on the I was taking the metro, the number 2. We were supposed to go to Ariana.
يعني متخيش يعني عمرها ما قالت واحد عمرها انا بيتي انا بيتي عمري ما عملت
No, I never preached anything. Often I would be asked few questions before I talk about the veil. But then there was one word said, and I said that I'm going to wear the veil. And then there was another girl who was our classmate, and she was with us attending the same general course. And then often they said, yeah, okay, we get it. But then I left the school, I left the university at 11:20. I had money. I went to a shop, and I was sleeveless at that time, and my shirt was tied around my waist. I left. I pulled the sleeves of my shirt. I put on the veil, and then I went home. A question would be like, who actually? Why I'm saying this? Because I would like to say here that my family did not say anything. I was not the subject of any oppression. It was a personal choice. Nobody asked me to do anything. When I went home, my mom asked, what did you do? I said, I just covered my head. She said, yes, but be careful. I did not understand that word because in the 90s, I was 6 or 7 years old. I did not know what it meant to be Islamist or anything. So even in the past, people were, often in the past, they would tell me, stop, don't say that, don't. Walls have ears of everything. That's why I say we lived so softly. We did not know anything about politics. And I have never believed that I would be representing any threat to the state when wearing that veil. This is really annoying. And this is really, I was very happy and I was studying and I was very pleased. Then the 7th of November celebration started, and then we were celebrated along that. The first time I was walking, and then somebody arrested me and stopped me and said, what are you wearing here? I said, I didn't do anything. I remember my brother never touched me. He never. And then I started crying, and I did not understand what was going on. I did not know what I was involved in because I did not know what was happening. And he was trying to remove my veil. Myriam was with me, who was a neighbor too. She took my veil, and it was dark gray, and then I said, okay. I just pulled the veil, and Myriam helped me to tie it to the back of my head. Then gradually we started looking for us in the university premises, which was a right given to me by the state, that is the freedom of the freedom to have an education and the right to enjoy that education. I did not know why the way I dressed had an impact on them. Then there started the harassment. When I put on that veil, 3 other girls followed suit, and they started wearing the veil. So that was, sometimes it was felt that maybe I felt that others were actually successful in getting out, but I thought that I would be doing I would find my way out. So when they started telling us to get rid of the veil, we substitute that with hats, with caps, and they say that no. They said here's a hat. This is a different look. This is fashion. So in the final analysis, I had my group whom we used to study with them. They called me Tupac, a rap singer. And until now, we meet with them, and I like them. Why do they call me Tupac? Because I used to wear a hat with a cap. When I walk in the streets, you can say I'm anything but wearing the veil. Despite all that, I was obliged to, often I was harassed. And this coincided with the first semester exams. There were courses I used to attend in classes next to the administration. I never attended those courses, and so I was expected to be to fail them anyway. And then because I did not pass those courses, it meant that I was not supposed to pass my exams. I was absent in 2 major modules and did not pass 2 modules. And now I have with me my grades transcript. I have 16 and a half, and 2 more 16s. This means I did not attend any of these courses, and I have all these grades. This does not mean that I had any merit other than my efforts. I was very hardworking. After semester 1, say that we've done so much, but we still see them around. And then it was the big problem. They closed the door, the big door, and they left only one small door. And they put a lady there who had a desk, and they would walk past her. All those who had veils would remove them. No, she would remove the veils before even getting, and she was ordered. That is, the school started from the outside. And then the bag would be inspected. You leave the veil there and you enter the school. In fact, I resisted. So what did I do? I used to live in Al Ghazala in the north. I would take 1 bus and 2 trains. I take the bus 5:30 in the morning or 6. And imagine I was 19 years old and I get in a bus, on a bus, and it was very dark early morning. I would be reading the Quran, almost read all of it in order to encourage myself. We arrive early, me and my sisters, and I would tell them that I'm talking on behalf of you. Maybe what I have experienced is nothing compared to their own stories. We arrive early, it's sometimes before 7 o'clock in the morning, because the employees arrive late. So we often smuggle ourselves from one of the corners. It happened that we hide in the toilets. Anecdote about this story is that one of our friends who was also Jihan, she was a very high-ranking student. She was in the toilet and she closed the door. So they realized, so there was somebody who used to come very early, and his job was he would enter the toilets and would knock on the doors. So the one door was closed, and he tried to open, and he said, say that one of the jokes that happened, that said she was knocking on the toilet, and she say, can you come out? Why didn't you answer when I knocked on the door? So I said, in my family, they educated me not to talk when in the toilet. And so when she came out, they say, he was up, he said, yes, now I know who you are. In fact, I don't know if she removed the veil or not. I think she just left without removing the veil.
السمستر الثانية باش نعديو
The second semester, and it was exams time. I sat for one of the exams. Walking past the amphitheater, I was wearing some form of a veil. And then I heard somebody shouting, "You there, wait and stop there." And then I just feel somebody who pulls me to the back, and I fall on the floor, and she pulls me with her. And of course, there was a crowd. It was a show. It was a free show. I said, "Yeah, what do you want me to do? I'll go with you anywhere you want." Then I arrived to her office, and we started this. What is this backwardness? We want you to progress and move forward, and you want to regress and go to us. And so, what is the problem with this? Who told you to wear this? And she was shouting and yelling at me. And I say, "You, Ines, why did you have intermediates?" It seems like there were teachers, I don't know the exact number. There were teachers who actually said that who actually pleaded my cause, and they said that I was a very hard-working student. And the answer was, "Who do you think you are?" Remove this. She was ordering me to remove my veil and said, "Why should I remove my veil?" In fact, honestly, I was very quiet. And then actually what happened is that they made me become more daring and talk. And then I did not realize that this was so dangerous or so threatening, this veil. And then all these problems started. Then I started the words of my mother when she told me to be careful. Because she knew what happened in the 90s. She asked me to leave. The lady here was the Secretary General of the Institute. I was going to mention her name, but I will not mention her name fully. Her name is Fadila, because I don't want to get so low to that level, because the problem is not personal, and it was not my personal problem. It was the problem of many people. After all, maybe she was just working under instructions, but then she was so zealous about it that she was closing the door and asking people, or deploying an employee entirely to do the work. This was something beyond control. I don't know. If all this energy was invested in our work, it would have been one of the most successful countries in this world. This was beyond any control. We sometimes would ask for any document. Sometimes we would wait 2 weeks and 3 weeks before we get this document delivered. But being monitored and being under supervision, this was excellent work. And they were very conscientious about it, and they did the work without any hesitation. I was denied access to exams. I was absent in 4 modules. Despite all that, I could have passed all the exams because my grades were quite high. I spent 13 years often top of my class, and then I'm denied the exams at the university where I dreamt to have a career is something quite shocking. And until that time, I did not understand.
عاملتها يعني اللي فات
what disaster, what a crime I committed.
هاني نحكي معاكم بربي.
See, I'm talking to you. Do you find me abnormal?
ضربت لكم رجعية.
Do you find me, I don't know,
ما تفهموش.
something you don't understand? 14 years. 14 years I've been repeating this question in my mind. Where is my problem? I sometimes look myself up in the mirror and say, why have I been considered as backward, as retroactive? I have a friends from Japan. They visit me, they talk to me. No one ever stigmatized me the way I was stigmatized by my country people. I was ordered not to take the exams. Every day I would take a bus and take two means of transportation. I would arrive before the institute. I would sit there until they finished the exams. First day, second day, third day, simply watch all my colleagues, all my fellow students take the exams, and I was just outside. After the exams, I was begging her to give me back my student card, which would be used for taking my exams. I don't want to cry here, I'm sorry. We were not allowed to sit for the exams. I was denied access to the exams. She threw this card to me, and she threw it on the floor. And I said, I will not pick it from the floor. I delivered this to you hand to hand. And I did not know that behind this there is some other authority. Then I started crying. Said, if you think you're right, Allah will support you. I said, today, tomorrow, after 1 year, after 2 years, after 10, 20 years, after death, maybe one day you will ask forgiveness for what you have done to me. Resets was the same thing. The next day, I had a nervous breakdown. My mother was diabetic. I was in very good health. The next day, I would lose consciousness, and people thought that I was epileptic. My mom was scared and frightened, and she had serious problems, and she had diabetic rashes, and then she's now diabetic. I apologize, Mom. I apologize for being the cause of that. In 2003, that summer was a very bitter time, was a very hard time. I would be fine, and then I would fall unconscious, and then sometimes I feel like I have no control over some parts of my body. The next year, I did not go to university. The day I went to get the document, that's document the grades, my grades, telling me that I failed after 13 years of flawless studium work and successes after success. The next year, I withdrew my registration. Often I would simply go there and smuggle myself very rapidly so that I'm not seen by anyone. And sometimes some of the administrative staff would sometimes simply take the documents for us.
فليكسيبل يعني مش تقول شد بسمه وكل كلمه عاد
I was flexible. At that time, it was say what is it? It's factional dress or sectarian dress. I did not know what sectarian dress meant.
شنو ننتمي
I was asking, please tell me what sectarian means, because I would like to know through this veil I belong to what.
اللي دخلت باش نقابل الطبيب خاطر انا
When I went to see a doctor, and I was obliged to go there because the administration, I was denied access, but still,
كما يقولوا التوانسه رجله
donc what happened, I pulled myself together.
دخلوا يعني طلاب كرام تعديت هبطت
I started coughing and covering myself, and I said, I'm very sick. I entered.
دونك هذيك ديجا انا طيحت باش نعدي
I made that concession.
وحكيت له الكل جبت له لي زيغام تاعي
I saw the doctor, and I,
طلع في لي مالادي نيفرولوجيك
after all those breakdowns, I read so much, and now I became a specialist to know about all my problems. I went to the doctor and gave him the diagnosis, and he said, yeah, I'm ready to deliver the certificate that you're sick and you cannot study. And then I received this document asking me to deliver to my institution the registration document and the student card. Then I went to see them and said that what I wanted just was to give back the documents.
ما نعرفش يسكت نيت ولا لا مشيت دخلت نجري باش نمد لهم الورقه في باليش اللي انا وفات ما نعرفش اسمه هذاك
I did not know if it was the process.
في بالي على انه نمدها يعني نعطيها للكاتبه العامه
I thought that I should deliver that to the Secretary General, this lady, Fadila.
المهم دخلت مديت لهم مشيت ترسيم ما خديتش لي شارج ما خديتش ما
I entered. When I gave the document, I did not take any justification that I delivered that. I don't know if that would have made any difference. I don't know that if taking any document certifying that I delivered back these documents to the institute would have made any difference. Because I wanted to be active and I wanted to do something, so I wanted to do something to while the time, books, reading, embroidery, sewing, whatever.
عدا وقتها عدا اون باراليل
So in parallel, this was the year I did not go to university. We had a network of sisters. Often they would be warned, be careful, don't take that road, don't go that past, watch out, that police station is arresting girls. And so
en 2002 2003 يعرفوه
in 2002, 2003, there was the Medina police station, which became reputed for arresting veiled women.
انكدوت اخرى هذيا
This is another anecdote. There was a policeman who used to tell us, dear sister, be careful that with the commitment I have to tie a veil. Make sure you go and buy that veil from that shop and bring it now. 14 years, what I'm saying, I hope just that it was not business, that the shop was not his and that he was making money out of this.
مشيت دخلت وقت الكل ما نحكيوش عاد في المراكز شنو يصير لك ويوك السؤالات
So all these questions and all those worries, you say, how do you pray? You pray according to the Malikite or the Hanafite. At that time, I did not understand really the difference. And it says sometimes, what are these questions being asked? I did not know what they meant, actually.
قالت نتبع الكل نحكيوش عاد على الكلام
And besides all the swear words and the insults I had, I remember there was a policeman who arrested me and started insulting me.
لا يعنينا المهم
But
المرة هذه سلكتها.
say this time you made it. Next time, if I get you, you will know what is going to happen to you.
بيان سور هذا الكل ما يلزمنيش نعاودو لدارنا.
Of course, I would never repeat this to my family. Oh no, fine, nothing is happening, nothing,
روح خاطر
because
راهو يلزمني نقول لكم اني انا بنت حي الغزاله.
I would like to say that I live in Gazala neighborhood since 2003.
شدوا من خيرة الشباب.
They arrested one of the finest
شدوا
and
يقراو في الايكونومي.
young men and women, one studying in medicine. Another one was arrested because he was praying the early morning prayers in the mosque every day. He was told why he didn't, he was asked why he did not pray at home. So City Ghazala became one of the reputed neighborhoods. Then I was known that I was the sister of Muhammad and Khalil.
بيان سور يعني بيسكو اختهم محاجبه دونك هما بيدهم باش يطولهم
As their sister is veiled, of course, they are also stained by the same blame. I say that my dear sister, and I have two older sister girls who were not veiled. And you don't believe that I was actually very, very committed, just like being here with you, that I am here with you wearing this. I'm not that holy woman. I'm not the Sufi rabbi, but I was stubborn because I could not understand what my mistake was. Third year, so 2004, I was engaged. My fiancé went with me. I frightened him that day. He was scared. He didn't know what he was up to. I was supposed to go do my registration, and I was asked that you have to submit an application for a special probation registration because you say you failed twice. No, you did not submit any. You did not withdraw your registration last year. So I was thinking that it was simply a year off, and then I found out that I was, and then I fainted, and my fiancé saw the other truth. I'm sorry, I like a humor. That's my nature. And often I make of my weaknesses strengths. And I would like to say that after 14 years, my closest friends, many of my closest friends do not know that I did not continue my studies because of my hijab, because of my veil. Many things I did not want to talk about, and only Allah knows my intention. And hopefully one day I stand before Allah and that I be forgiven. I'm not a holy woman. I make errors, I make mistakes. I'm not better than anyone else. Sometimes you ask these questions. What about these conventions and the freedom of dress and the freedom of mobility and all those big words? Because in 2003, when I was at home, I was reading and investigating. So finally, what happens is that the state makes an activist an opposition of you. Because if they left us just like that, it would be just other regular human beings with veils. That's all. I was a blogger then at that time. I started blogosphere and started talking to people and started contacting the elite. And then stigmatization became and I was on the bus once, two young girls were talking in French and they were actually making fun of me. certainly, because they thought that I veiled, I could not understand their language. Oppressed and submissive. I'm not oppressed, I'm free. If I were oppressed, and if it was under an obligation, I would have removed that. The day I put this veil on, it was out of conviction. Spent that time reading and reading international conventions about the freedom of dress, personal liberties, natural liberties. It is the right of anyone to wear what they like. The first thing that happens is that when people see you, the perspective of society or the view of society, their vision, when they see you, you don't even talk to them and you say, oh, your belief, your faith is in your heart. Who told you that the faith is in the lungs? We know faith is in the heart. And what is approved by work? That's what I studied, because then I started reading about faith. One of them looked at me and said that when people see you, when I see you in the veil, I feel aggressed because you remind me. So what does that mean? I should remove the veil so you feel fine. Ben Ali dared to face us only because people supported him. Ben Ali is the tiny thing in the mind of everyone. Disasters. So what is... I would like to understand. Here I am communicating. Here I'm talking. You can hear me? You can understand me? Did this prevent me from communicating with you? And now, lately, 14 years after, a former Prime Minister, Mr. Manuel Valls, says that in Tunisia, like in Iran, we impose on women to wear the veil. I would like to tell, don't get it wrong. We used to impose on women to remove the veil and not to put it on. Mr. Valls, from 2002 to 2006, we're pushing through. I'm talking about myself. I do not know what happened in the 90s. I was 6, 7 years old, so I did not know really what happened at that time. What is good about this is that those who were affiliated or those who had allegiance to, that is the accusation. That is when submit applications for jobs, they would ask for a criminal record, but our criminal record for us is on our own heads. When you go to, I contacted an offshore company. They called me, a call center, because it seems like I mastered it with the French language and said, yes, madam, please contact us. So I contacted them. When she looked at me, the lady, she looked at me, I felt it. I felt that gaze. In fact, she dealt with me positively. I had the meeting. I said, madam, only one problem. I started smelling the thing. It said that we have a secular policy. And it said, say what signs and what can you say? You can remove it and work, and then when you leave, you wear it. I said, I did not remove this for my university. I would remove this for a call center. I won't remove it. That's all. Bye. Bye. So this is continuing. We have a very important incident very recently. The hostess in Tunis said, because what is happening is that this is discrimination against those who are accused, but there is also now discrimination, exclusion directly. There's a direct one, because our signs are visible. Whenever they see you, we will contact you, or in fact, in order to be fair, there are those who tell you that I'm sorry, but we have instructions. Just please bear with me, I'll just open parentheses. Those who tell you that the British Prime Minister, that with terrorism there is no human rights. I'm sure that he did not say this, because I'm sure if he said that, things would be against him all the way, because when you torture someone and you violate his or her physical integrity, that is, if it's terrorist and doing bad things, so you are like him. Apply the law. You have no right to touch him or touch me or tell me to remove this or that, or to try to suggest things or insinuate things. No. I'm happy that there is this law that incriminates violence against women. Then I discovered that it has to do with domestic violence, not any form of violence. One first request, I hope. I have a daughter, Khadija. My hope that my daughter and the daughters of all Tunisian women, one day they do not go through what I have been. If they want to wear the veil, they wear it. Nobody would impose that on them. They would be free, and all women shall remain free. I will not impose anything on you, and nobody would impose anything else. This is real freedom. And second, personal request, too, if you don't mind. Is that a good? I would like to go back to university, if you don't mind. It's not like when I was 19, I had no responsibility, and now at the age of 34 and a mother, I thought that it was systematic, but apparently it is not. It seems like I would have to submit an application to the university. I don't know if the university would approve of that. I want to go back to university because I want to do that. Because many people think that I left university because I was a bad student. If I were a bad student, I would not have gone through all of this, including the depression. And another thing, as Mrs. Fadila, whom I greet from this position when I told her, we meet one day, I want to meet with her. And I want her to apologize because she destroyed my life. And because when people look at me, say, oh, you did not finish your studies, you did not graduate. There are even those from my relatives, I was talking, say that she had 8 years, she had a master's degree, and I said, and how many years did you spend at university? None. Because, yes, certainly my friends and others, those who went to university with me, and who protected me, and who supported me, and whom I love. Some just had their PhDs in Canada. Some are working. Some have been promoted to high positions in secondary education, and I'm jobless, and I have no success at university. That's all. Thank you. Thank you.
The last testimony is for Najat, and Ibtihal Abdel Latif is going to introduce Mrs. Najat Aishawi. We now shall submit to you a testimony of this systematic violation that targeted Tunisian women as a result to the 108 circular. Those who have been harmed by this circular are victims as per the organic law of transitional justice. But the damage that ensued, the implementation of this circular, did not stop with the violation of the freedom of dressing, but it included the violation of the right to education, to health, the violation of the right to work, arbitrary arrest, administrative control, pushing to displacement and the ban on travel. And based on the violations that were submitted to the TDC, we have received 4,200 women victims, and the percentage of those who have been harmed by the 108 circular are about 40%. That is 1,684 women victims out of the 4,048 women. Now we will be listening to Mrs. Najat Ishawi, who is one of the victims of this circular. She is a teacher. She is a teacher of high school, and she is an activist in the civil society and a leader in the Boy Scout Association. I'd like to say hello to everyone. With the lifting of injustice, there remains the hope for our hearts, and hope makes life continue. With this greeting, I shall start my testimony where Ines ended. I apologize for using the standard Arabic because I believe that the standard Arabic is the best language to express the torture and the suffering that led to a success, the success of an entire generation, the success of Tunisian women who sacrificed their life, and those women who have given a lot from the basket to the education. I'd like now to hail successes that were built on suffering. Ines said in her testimony that Ben Ali could only control society because the members of society turned against each other. In the silence, under the silence and a space of oppression came the Circular 108. This circular has been with me since the age of 15, since 1984. This was the beginning, and it was an option. Nobody forced me, nobody imposed that. This was my personal choice. When I was only 15, I was studying in the high school of Ibn Khaldun in Rades, a southern suburb of Tunis. From 1984 to 1986, I was not harassed as a veil wearer. But by the end of the school year of 1986 and with the start of the school year of 1987, I was in the senior class arts. I found myself being arrested and stopped from education, barred from education because of the veil I was wearing at the beginning of the year. They say this is a sectarian dress that is prohibited. We wore jeans and long blouses, and we used the Tunisian kind of scarf, and they said no, it's prohibited. We even wore a veil, we even wore traditional dress. We went too far trying to understand, but we ended up understanding that the problem was not with the veil, but it was with the idea associated with that veil. The veil is a phenomenon that comes and goes, but the fixed idea doesn't die. I've maintained this idea with the idea of my awareness as a woman. I was a very aware woman. I organized so many musical activities. I organized many activities about sexually transmissible diseases, and there were a lot of student activities in our high schools. There was involvement of left-leaning and right-leaning people. Back then, we were fully aware of ourselves and our environment, and unlike the 2000 generation that is characterized by ignorance, a generation who is not cognizant of its identity. In our battle with the veil, there was a glimpse of hope, of some kind of change, and a coup or a sort of a change that was disguised in modernity and proning women's rights. We, students of the School of Radis, we agreed to march, to take to the streets in a protest, hoping to be brought back to our schools. There were about 30 girls from the Radis High School. In Radis there were 4 schools, the female school, the technical school, and there was the professional short sections of high school and Ibn Khaldun Radis. We took part in a march with some students of the high school of the teachers in La Marsa. Since we got off the train, everybody was looking at us. We went to the souks and the markets, and the police station of the souk asked us where we were going. We said we were going to the Ministry of Education because we want to be back to education. And then we were encountered by law enforcement officers who assaulted us, arrested us, and they took us to the police station. And after interrogation, we signed commitment whereby we would get rid of our veil. We would do that on a daily basis, actually, to give up the veil. And after the reconciliation approach and the speeches and discourses, we were brought back to education in the second half of the year, and I flunked the year because I had no fault with that. At the beginning of the year after 1988, 1989, I continued my education, and in the second semester or the second half of the school year, Mr. Abdelhamid Al-Haddawi, God bless his soul, he would expel me without any reason, and therefore I was expelled, and at the end of the year I was definitively expelled from school. I passed the high school diploma examination on a private basis, and I failed that test. The next year he deprived me of education. He told me, you have no place in this school. And I made a solemn pledge to him as a free Tunisian woman that at the end of the year I would confront him with my baccalaureate certificate and that I would go to university whether he likes it or not. 1989-1990 school year, I continued my, I would like to thank the director of the school of Abi Qutayba, and I was among the 5 students who succeeded from that school. So I took my certificate and I showed it to that director. I told him, you see, these girls can succeed also. So I chose the High Institute at the beginning, 1990-1991, the university year. This year was characterized by some kind of boiling. The pledges that were made by the maker of change started to change themselves. I took the first partial test I was also an activist in the Tunisian Student Union. Since I was a pupil at high school, I've taken part in all of the activities. It was a trade unionist student union. They would respect women's rights. It was like a labor union and a student union that was interested and keen on social activities, the society that never supported us. We were deprived of our education in the second half of the school year. We were deprived of our scholarship. If you want to take your scholarship, you would be arrested. If you want to take an exam, you would be arrested. In the end-of-year examination and tests, Munia Haji was arrested. She was a student, aged 20. Munia Haji was arrested. Habiba also was arrested. Habiba Udini. She was my colleague in the Students' Union. I left the country displaced. My sister, in the meantime, was passing her exam in Alawiya school. I never thought I would go across the Gaza border, and imagine she had to take off the veil in order to take the back examination, and the high school of Alawiya was heavily guarded. This was the situation in the 1990s, and you all remember how bullets were fired at the universities, and many students were caught up in the crossfire and killed. So I left the country because I was forced to leave, and I thought I would make a better future. I studied abroad, and I was very good. Every summertime I come back. When I left the airport, I had no problem. Nobody asked about anything, because up to 1994, in the summer of 1994, I came back to present my dissertation for geography, and as I was a second-year law student in Mauritania, we could study in the university system or institute system. So I wanted to finish my dissertation, and my dissertation about the role of Tunisian women in the development of the northern western region of Tunisia, because I believed that I was a Tunisian. As I was preparing for the dissertation, I found myself in the detained and arrested in Bushusha police station. This arrest meant for me that even that woman who fled the country for education fled to affirm her presence as a Tunisian woman. In Casablanca, we were well respected by the people because Tunisian women are highly respected. I come back to my country and I find myself interrogated, beaten, and I find myself in front of someone called Haj Jawedi, who once told me, "Why did your fiancé go to Mauritania to take your news from you?" My fiancé comes to Mauritania because I was in Mauritania. That person does not believe in love, that a person could travel a long way to see his beloved girl. Yes, women are the beauty and the second half of men. After a period of torture and insult, tearing of clothes, after being subjected to extreme torture, I've witnessed all kinds of suffering. We've overcome that, though. I was transferred on the 5th of October 1994 to a different prison after a bitter day in the prison cell of the court. I was a female. Everybody went home and I started screaming, "I'm here." So the court guard found out that I was left behind alone in that court cell. They were interrogating, they were with the investigating judge, but since 7:30 a.m. up to 10 p.m., I never saw anyone. The woman who comes is taken away for interrogation. I thought I would be going back home because after I signed, after he forced me to sign, he said, "You have nothing to worry about." I remember I was in the court, but somewhere I had some irony and some disdain for that court. So I never gave away anything. He took away my veil. He took my bodily integrity, but he never touched my integrity. He never touched my resolve. He never touched my hope. I was left with some boys of the same cause. I can name Abdelhamid Abdallah, Khalil Driri, Farid Bouzribi. We had excellent days, excellent times in Mauritania. We shouldered each other, and we were among the bases of the Students' Union. I was transferred to prison, to the 9th of April prison, and then I was transferred to the female prison in Manouba. In the female prison in Manouba, after 1 week without food, without sleep, in a cell where water was running all night long, you spent the whole day interrogated with torn clothes in the cold of October. Can you imagine this Tunisian woman, the descendant of Elisa and Fairy Fatima? You see how the November regime has mistreated women. In addition to that ordeal, so after the interrogation, you are inspected and you are body searched. There was a strip search, actually. This is a call for women guards and correctional officials and officers to treat women more gently. I would spend the whole year in the prison with all of the suffering and setbacks involved. But in prison, I opened on another woman. I was no longer the 19-year-old girl. I became the 30, 40-year-old woman, so imbued with the experiences of those who have suffered. We were mistreated so badly. We would be put in the worst possible conditions. The Beylikul house of Manouba, which is the prison, the female prison, they say it's your father's house. It has some mosaics of rooms for cases of adultery, cases. Some children would stay with their women, with their mother inmates. See how children are mistreated. You would be mixed with criminals in the worst possible conditions. The first week spent in prison was a week of fear. Today I feel all right because I have never been raped. But when I arrived to the prison, I heard that some women would assault other women. This is horrible. I can't bear women's violence to other women. This is an order to terrorize us, an order to terrorize women, intellectual women. I would not talk about my mother suffering, bringing the food basket. You know, this happened to me. I'm not going to dwell on the prison. I have to remember Najat Felta. She was ordered
يأمروها تضرب بنات الصبا خاصة لأنه
to
بنات خاصة عاقلين ياسر
to beat some other women.
ما ينجموش يردوا فيها الفعل العنيف ما تربيوش على العنف.
These poor girls who have never been accustomed to violence. I hope God would forgive this woman and those who ordered her. In the prison, there were some good folks who treated us well, but so many others beat us. I remember one of the officers beat me because I didn't wear the veil when I went for the hearing. When I told her, why do you give me a traditional veil after you remove my veil? I have no case to be ashamed of. I want to go to the court without the traditional veil. And in the court, I took off that veil and appeared before the court without that sefseri or the traditional veil. When I went back to the prison, I was beaten black and blue. In October 1995, after 1 year spent in prison, on the 5th of October 1995, I was taken to the law enforcement station in Bardo. They gave me 500 milims and told me to go to the other neighboring police station. In my mind, I said I would not stop at that police station. I went home. I asked my sister to come and take me. I spent on the 6th of April, I went to the 9th of April prison because I wanted to do something before that law enforcement officer would take away my security. This is the story of many veiled women. As I found out later that the policemen went to terrorize my mother, and when I went to the police station, he told me I would undergo administrative control in 5 different police stations. And he asked me why I had a student card. And he told me that I would undergo administrative control in the Radis police station, in the Megrin police station, in the National Guard station of Benarus, and you would sign in Sijumi. That was the daily activity. So every morning I have to greet all the law enforcement officers in 5 police stations, and I would reach the university at 11 a.m. At 3 I have to come back through the same itinerary, that is, go through administrative control throughout the 5 police stations until I graduated in 1999. Before my graduation, and my fiancé was sentenced to prison, was arrested in prison, and in 1997 he graduated. In May 1997 we secretly got married because I knew if we would declare our marriage, everybody is going to be questioned, and no guests would come to my marriage if they know about it. So I didn't want to give the police that opportunity to spoil my marriage. So, okay, after 2 days of my marriage, on Monday I started being interrogated. That was the 13th of May, and this was my... so I was interrogated in the morning. So at 2 p.m. I barely make it to the university to take the examination, and at 6:30 p.m. I go home. In Hamdiya police station, in Fushena police station, and in Sijumi police station, and in 18 January police station, I sign and I meet the police officer in the cafe. He says, he proposed to me that I would snitch on what is happening in the university. I would tell him I would, but I never did. they did not like that I got married secretly. 1 month later after the marriage, and my parents' house in Radis, in front of the power plant, I and my husband were arrested. I was going to my parents' house. We were taken to the district police station in Benares, and they accused us of trying to leave the country illegally. We told them that we were in a bus station going home to my parents' house. They said, no, you were going to leave the country in a legal fashion. So our clothes were taken off, and the 1 month bridegroom was hanged, was suspended. This is our marriage gift to you. This is the punishment that you deserve for not telling us about your marriage. We were supporting each other in those difficult conditions, and they would be astonished at the way we stick together. You all know that Tunisian women are strugglers and are affectionate women who believe in love. Once again, I was arrested in Bushusha for an entire week, but my parents did not know about that. My in-laws did not know, and my parents did not know. After 1 week, I left the court, and then my husband was tried for illegal possession of gun. And then, as I left the court, one police officer said, "You are going to carry the food basket for your incarcerated husband." Now, 4 times I visited my husband. My experience increased, and the more challenges, the more resolved I became. I was able to give a lot of my energy. I was one of those women who have been educated to give the maximum of themselves, be it at the university, be it in the Islamic movement, or as women of the Students' Union. In addition, because before my release, 2 months before my release, they incarcerated girls, Najwa Rizgi and Afaf Nasser. I would like to greet all of these female strugglers. The 1990s was the period of excellent struggle of women, the great struggle of women, the women who have shown their strong resolve and attachment to the arts of life. These women strugglers, in the silence of the media, found no support in light of everything that was there. In one of the national celebrations, as we celebrate the Women's Day on the 13th of August, there were numerous calls in order to put an end to the phenomenon of the veil, because the phenomenon of veil came back with Ines and her likes, and therefore they have to eliminate this phenomena again. But the idea was there. We were subjected to administrative control. This idea survives because it is a right idea. The Tunisian women found no support from the civil society organizations, and I personally had the opportunity to get involved with the civil society. I was strongly resolved to advertise the cause of these women, because we became forgotten militants within the framework of truth-seeking and transitional justice, because the first step is truth-seeking. I've come to know that through our activity within Tunisian Women Association, as we celebrated 1 day of loyalty to those women who struggled and who suffered. There was the first public hearing was in the Congress Palace in May, and they gave their testimonies regarding the 108 circular. This circular made a lot of achievements for the female prisoners. A lot of women are still suffering. Some women were fired. My sister was fired as a teacher. I went back to work, but my sister never recovered her job. Imagine I came back to work, but my sister is still fired. Some women could not finish their education like Ines. This circular destroyed many dreams, many hopes. But despite that, we overcame these sufferings and we managed to achieve great successes. Not as an individual, myself as a Tunisian veiled woman. With my veil, I managed to invade many areas of expertise. I was not that inhibited woman. I was not that a closed woman. I was a green Tunisian woman who is open, who was emancipated, progressist. I have dealt correctly and properly with with many people. We were veiled women. We were active in many areas of activities. We have eliminated that wall that says that this veil is the symbol of backwardness. It is rather a symbol of the progressive Tunisian women with its Maliki religious group. We have taken part in the national liberation movement. We have been there, and I have been imbued with the opinions of the president of the movement, of the Nahda movement. I've been acquainted with the literature of the Nahda party, that is, women should be educated, should reach all positions, that women should be active in all areas. Women should not falter. I have always been good at theater activities, recitation, novel. My veil has never barred me from creativity. Today, in this decisive moment, I'd like to send a message in a brief way. I leave the best for last, and this is a habit for me. I'd like to say today, the Tunisian woman, I am the green who has cried Uthman ibn Mahmoud in the 90s. I'm the green woman who supported the effort of Bouazizi and cried for his death. So that I would call upon Tunisian women to support Tunisian women in the future. We have to be tolerant about the past. We have to show forgiveness about the past. We today are Tunisian women. We are the creed of the Tunisian society. We have to move forward, veiled and non-veiled, politicized and non-politicized. We know that torture has had its toll on women. The left-leaning trade unionist, the right-leaning unionist. Today I'd like to convey a message to women. Our mothers, despite their limited level of education, have taught us social activities. And today we are the mothers of today. We have to push tomorrow's girls towards a better living, towards peaceful cohabitation. I believe that the Truth and Dignity Commission will write the history of the struggle of these women. And in the history of the national movement, I found no female name mentioned, as if the Tunisian women never took part in the national movement for liberation. I know that Tunisian women have had an impact on the national movement and national liberation movement. So we have to enshrine that on the 8th of March is a great achievement to women. 8th of March cannot be denied by anyone. I, the Tunisian woman today, I would like to tell the Truth and Dignity Commission that Tunisian women must be mentioned in all periods of the history of Green Tunisia, because Tunisia shall remain Green Tunisia with the generosity of its women, with the complementarity of roles. We are Tunisian women. Tunisian women shall remain great women of Tunisia. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Najet. We finished tonight's session. Tomorrow we shall meet again. We will deal with the control over the internet, and we shall meet and see you tomorrow. Good evening.